Good morning.
Good morning.
The lesson I'm going to present today, I want it to be a very positive lesson. In the beginning, it may sound a bit negative, but it's not meant to be that way, because I want us to look at ways that we become a better Christian. And I'm going to look at the Beatitudes and one particular Beatitude. But I want to start with a story I heard. A guy by the name of George Bernard Shaw was America's greatest playwright. He lay dying. He knew he was dying. His friends knew he was dying. So they came to be with him those last few minutes. One of the friends said, "George, in your lifetime, you have known several presidents of the United States. You have been welcomed in the courts of Europe by all the kings and queens. You are on a first-name basis with the world's great writers, poets, musicians, and artists. Who are you going to miss the most?" He quickly responded, "The person I'm going to miss the most is the person I could have been." Isn't that a little sad? And that's the reason I say I don't want this to be negative, but isn't that a little sad to come to the end of life and say, "Oh, what I could have done"? And I think there's some normalcy to that. You know, we all can look back and say, "I wish I was a better student, wish I'd have been a better husband, father, whatever, parent." But what I want to think about is the situation where we take a bit of an analysis and say, have I become the best Christian I could have? Have I taken the tools, the abilities, opportunities that God gave me, and as a result, I can say, I have become, or I am becoming, the best Christian that I can? So that's kind of the thought that I want to take a look at, because do you find it difficult to live the Christian life? Sometimes. That's a partially honest man. Sometimes. Who else? Freddie, do you have it? You have a hard time? Okay. Why do we think it's difficult to live the Christian life? Exactly, Donnie. It's not what the human person wants. It's something different. And that's a great answer, because that's exactly what we're kind of going to be looking at. It is a difference. But when we say it's difficult to live the Christian life, look at Matthew 11:30. Matthew 11:30. Matthew 11:30 talks about the idea that my burden is easy. Somebody read that. Somebody have it? My yoke is easy, my burden's light. Read that, Joe, please. You got it? You just know what it is. Okay, that's good enough. But why, if Jesus says my yoke is easy and my burden's light, why do we have a difficult time leading the Christian life? You don't? But you're a fisherman. You're used to lying. So that makes it altogether different. That's a great answer, Jimmy. It is.
No worries.
That's a great point. Yeah, I'm choking up. I've got a bad throat. If I start gagging and throwing up and lose a lung or something, you'll know. Go ahead. Yes. And when you can't be a Christian, you should be. The problem with that is that we're missing out on the greatest joy of life. Because the greatest joy of life is when our life is in tune with the life that God meant for us to be, involved in, and the things that are there. So when we think about this, then there's got to be a situation where, you know, what our problem is, what we do about it. So our problem is finding out why we have not been doing this. I think I think Jesus kind of had this same situation when we look at the Sermon on the Mount. Because when you look at what was going on in Matthew 5, if you'll turn to Matthew 5, you'll see where they're talking about the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus had just picked his 12 apostles. He had just brought them together as a group. Can you imagine, can your mind just kind of go back and think about how that would be to see these 12 men? You ever been somewhere where, okay, you know, who are these people? How did I get here? Why am I here? My imagination just says, I can just see them kind of looking at each other. And I can see people walking by saying, who are those guys? What are they doing here? Most scholars think that this area where the Sermon on the Mount took place was near Capernaum. There's an area. Has anyone been there? Jabbo, did you go there when you went on your... Tell us what you saw there. Yeah. Did they say this was where the Beatitudes were? Okay, they think it's pretty much. Okay, so the situation is such that the apostles are gathered there. This has what I read, and if I'm wrong, correct me, a great view of the Sea of Galilee. Can you imagine a morning like this, meeting with Jesus? This area is called Horns of Hutton. There's a big pinnacle here and a pinnacle here, and there's a little area in here. And many scholars think that's where the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitude area took place. So can you imagine Jesus being there with these 12 apostles and what they were seeing for the first time? Because he assembled them and began to wanting to teach them. The Gospel of Matthew is also called the teaching gospel because so many of Jesus' teachings are there in Matthew. And so Jesus is introducing a brand new lifestyle. Why is it brand new? What's new about it? Well, been religious leaders forever.
Well, they were told not to murder. You've heard that don't murder, but I say don't hate. Commit adultery, don't lust. I mean, and then to pray for your enemies. I mean, it was just contradiction lifestyle.
Exactly, Bernie. It was something absolutely brand new, something they had never seen before. And so, you know, what he was telling them is that I want to get you together and tell you something brand new. And if you're part of the expression, I want you to be able to buy into this. I remember at the beginning of football season, Coach Nick Saban was talking about his players. And they came in for fall practice, and they had been given things to do over the summer, weight charts and things to do. And he said he was very surprised that every one of them met their goal. And you can only do that if you adopt the lifestyle, if you become what he's wanting you to become. Because if you don't, you're not going to play on Saturday. So that's kind of what Jesus is introducing something, and he's saying, guys, this is what you're going to have to do. And sometimes that's referred to as the keys to the kingdom. Probably most everybody in here has a key in their pocket, right? What do you use the key for?
Open.
Okay, to unlock something. And isn't that kind of what he's doing? He's unlocking a whole new lifestyle. He's unlocking a new way of living. Because, you know, you look at the Pharisees, the religious leaders, they were not honorable people. And yet Jesus is saying, you got to really do these things to be what I want you to be. And in doing so, I'm unlocking for you the joys of Christianity that you could never even thought about. What else does a key do? It locks. What does it lock? Kind of like Jimmy was talking about. I think it locks out the world. It locks out the bad things. You know, even Jesus, when he talks about coming to see someone, he knocks at the door. He doesn't kick it down. He doesn't have a key. You just don't have to answer the door. So the keys to the kingdom, I think what he's saying here is that this is going to unlock a whole new world to you, a world you have never even thought about before. And in the process, you're going to have to lock out some old ideas. When I was thinking about this, Doug Ragland came to mind because in doing some research on this, there's a lot of words that have a completely different meaning and kind of put us in a whole different phase when we see what they're talking about. When the apostles saw Jesus and came to where he was, he did a couple of things and said a couple of things that immediately alerted them that this is very special. This is going to be a real unusual conversation. It's not the kind of thing where we just sit around and talk, but this is different. And if you look in Matthew 4, Matthew 5, particularly talking about the Beatitudes, it says that Jesus sat. What's important about that? Jesus came in and sat down. What? If you had been there at that time, what would that have meant to you? I'm sorry? That's how the rabbis were official in their speaking. And that's what he meant by, if a rabbi sat down, then this means what I'm telling you now is official. This is gospel. This is real. So soon as the apostles saw Jesus being seated, then that's what they recognized. Wow, this is not just a casual conversation. He sat down. Our Catholic friends, I'm told, even still use the word ex cathedra, which means when the Pope is speaking, seated, ex cathedra, it's official. It's doctrine. It's not just a conversation. So when he did this, he's alerting them that this is going to be very special. In our colleges and universities, they still sometimes use the word professor's chair for the chairmanship of the mathematics department or the chairmanship of the education department, because the person in charge is something special. The second thing it says is that Jesus began speaking or was saying. If you'd been there at that time and listened to what was going on, what that was meaning was that this was not a casual conversation, in that when Jesus is saying, he's having a real serious heart-to-heart conversation. One of those real emotional, sit down, this is serious and we need to talk about it. Have you been in a position, guys, where your wife calls and says, what time are you coming home? About 6. Well, as soon as you get here, we got something we got to talk about. Did the house burn down? You know, kids leave? What? You know, it just sounds, ooh. So, and that's kind of what Jesus is saying. This is very strong. This is emotional. This is an outpouring from my heart of what I want to tell you. The other thing that's kind of interesting, besides that he sat and he was saying, he used the term, blessed are they, for a lot of things. What language did Jesus speak in?
Aramaic.
Aramaic. What's wrong with him saying, blessed are they? For one thing, in Aramaic, there's no word for are. So this causes us to lose a lot of the meaning of what's being said, in the sense that we're looking at it from our words, how we describe something, and how we use something. So what Jesus is wanting to say is that, guys, I'm introducing something completely brand new to you. And in the process of doing this, there's going to be some times, there's going to be some situations that you're going to kind of wonder about. And particularly, I want to look at the one that says, number 2, blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. All my life, I never understood that. Do you understand that? Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. What do you think that means?
Well, you mourn death. Death has been defeated.
Okay, say it again, Joe.
You mourn death, and when we see him, death will have been defeated.
Okay, you mourn death. And that's kind of what we think of as they're in mourning. Anybody else have a thought?
Over sin.
Sin. Mourn because of what, Reuben?
Because of sin.
Because of sin in what way?
Well, as Christians, that Christ was telling them that they should, the disciples should feel bad over the fact that people are sinning. Telling us today, we should look at the world and all the things going on, and we should mourn over what all the things we see.
Mourn what's going on in the world around us.
Yeah.
And somebody else said, yeah. Mourn for the lost. Anybody else have an idea? I think it was a little more personal, just my opinion. I think what he is saying that we need to use a different word than mourn, because let's look at what was just said and I'll kind of back that up. He said, blessed are they that mourn, for what will happen to them? They will be comforted. Before you can mourn, what has to happen? You've got to have some sin in your life. You've got to have something to happen. I think what he may have been saying, and if you just kind of look at the words differently, you know, it's really great that you're so upset about the sin you committed that you're just really being troubled by it. I think if you took it to the point where he would say that the sin caused us to mourn, and the sin is such that it has disrupted our whole lifestyle. I have sin in my life. It really, really is bothering me. You can be comforted. How are you going to be comforted? Do I? Yes. If you sin, who can forgive you?
Right.
Only God. So you have a great inroad. You know, God, I sinned. I'm really so sorry. And only God is going to comfort you. Only God is going to bring you into the situation where that can be appeased. I think we need to sort of take this very personal, that what he's talking about here is the idea for us individually. And it's not something that's going to occur in the hereafter. This comforting is not going to occur 2 weeks from now. When does it occur?
Now.
Immediately. Only if what? Not only if we repent, but what else? And this is the hard thing, because it's just my Sylvian. We acknowledge the fact that God is forgiven us. Do you sometimes find that hard? Let's imagine God saying, Carolyn Wagner has asked me 7 times to forgive her this. I wish you'd understand. I gave her forgiveness the very first time. Do we think something? Yes, James.
I think the word blessed here refers to a future well-being. So if you bless it to those who mourn, you mourn because you don't have well-being right now. But the fact that you mourn leads to a future well-being. That is when you correct what that causes the mourning.
Are you saying the future well-being that once you're...
Blessed refers in every case here almost to a future well-being somewhere out beyond that.
Yes. Do y'all understand what he was saying then? And I think it also is an immediate situation. You know, we're promised that God forgives us. Why can't we forgive ourselves?
That's hard.
It is, isn't it? Why, Ginger?
Well, we know ourselves. We know our weaknesses.
But don't we know God that says,
Yeah, but it's
I
still-
will forgive you?
I think the Holy Spirit makes it burdenous.
What?
I said, no, we don't know something. That's the problem.
That's a great point.
What did you say?
That we don't know that God forgives us. Is that kind of what you were saying? We haven't really accepted that and break it, and make it happen like it's supposed to, and how we would really like to see it happen, and things we want to do with it.
Maybe because we don't forgive other people, we don't believe he forgives us either. And when the devil accuses us, we believe him more readily than we believe God.
And I believe we're much easier for us to forgive someone else than to forgive ourselves. And that's wrong. That is just almost choosing to carry the guilt burden around.
Yeah. Sometimes, you know, until the consequences aren't taken away, we have to keep seeing consequences of our sin, and it's part of it.
That's a great point. It's a reminder that I should not have done that or whatever. Yes, Donna.
Back to the point of comfort, tied back into forgiveness, repentance. I don't know about others in here, but several times in my life I tossed and turned and couldn't sleep because of some particular problem. And instead of the first resort, maybe it becomes the last resort, to pray about it.
Yes.
And not go on straight.
Yes.
Because I feel either forgiveness is something that I've done, I said I may pray 7 times about it. I ought to have confidence in the first time. I
Yes.
know that. But there's something comforting even to the point where you can relax and resume your normal activities if and truly within you can feel forgiveness.
Great point. Because I think a lot of times we sort of operate on the Las Vegas thing. You know, what happened in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. And so we say, well, I want to be forgiven enough that nobody finds out about it. Is that just a confession on my part? Maybe I shouldn't have said that. But, you know, we want the forgiveness, but not the purging that comes with it. For the recognition that, yes, you know, that was wrong. You've got to do something about it. Well, when you think of sin, what do you think of? Tell me a big sin.
Well, unforgiveness itself.
Okay. But what do we call the 10
Murder,
Commandments? And that's
adultery.
kind of what I want to take a second to look at, is because we call them the 10 Commandments. And it's the thou shalt nots. And it kind of gets down here to the do's and the don'ts. If you look at the 10 Commandments, for example, thou shalt not murder. How many people murdered somebody last week? Doesn't count thinking about doing that to your husband now, ladies. It just, how many people told a really big lie?
Probably all of us.
Ginger, this is not time to just... How many, used a 5-finger discount and stole some stuff this week?
Oh, no.
So if this is breaking God's law. But, you know, in the 10 Commandments, does it sound like, and I'm not going to ask about the rest of them, by the way, that, you know, why are y'all here? Because you haven't sinned. Is that all sin is? Of the 10 Commandments, how many are do's? There's 8 don'ts, so how many do's are there? What are the 2 do's? Thou shalt
Love the God.
honor your father and mother.
Love thy neighbor as thyself.
And what's the other one?
Love thy neighbor as thyself.
Sabbath. Sabbath day and keep it holy. So when we break one of these, when our sin is stealing, lying, doing something like that, we're breaking God's law. That is one of the definitions of sin, is breaking God's law. Is that the extent of it? Is that the only way we can do sin? The thought I have in mind is that we can also break God's heart by not becoming the Christian He meant for us to be. It's like we aim for something with a rifle to shoot a can off of a fence post and we miss it. And that's the same kind of idea here, that if we fail to become what God meant for us to be, then is that not a sin? Have we not lived up to His... When you were little, do you remember, this was just kind of was, that if you did something wrong, your mom said, well, your father comes home. He's going to wear you out. Well, that was breaking the law. You know, Pam, and it's over with. But did your mom ever sit down with you, take your hand and say, you really disappointed me? I heard the groans from those who are guilty. I just can't believe you would do something like that. I mean, you're just saying, beat me with a 2 before, but don't talk to me like that. I can't stand it. So I think in one sense, that's what God is expecting from us, is that He wants us to be given our hearts to Him. It's not so much of the do's and don'ts in religion. It's the becoming. Can you do all the good deeds that Christians do and still not become a Christian?
Absolutely.
Could be the Lord calling me home. What in the world? Pay your bills. Y'all getting a lot of crazy phone calls here. Okay, I will vote. Leave me alone. So, I think what God is saying is that He wants us to become a certain person, a certain thing. And He wants our character. He wants us to be such that we become the Christian that He meant for us to be. And if we fail to live up to that, do you think that when a child is born, he has a sort of a certain DNA, a certain amount of good characteristics, a certain amount of talents and abilities? Why does he have those? Why does God put them in those? What's the purpose of it?
He has a plan.
For, yes, we who had those, that we all agree, we're supposed to use those for what? To His glory, absolutely. That's the reason they're there. And so we disappoint God when we don't become the Christian that we should be. That was the bell. So I just want to end with a couple of thoughts here.
When is this going to start getting encouraging?
Yeah, I want to know that too.
This is the only Sunday I'll teach. I will close with something that has haunted me, and I keep it kind of close to my mind just because in Psalms 1 verse 2, it talks about the man who really wants to be a Christian, the man who really seeks after God's heart, doesn't have trouble with the laws and the things that God's supposed to do. Because he buys into them, he meditates about them, they become a part of his life. And so by living the Christian life is not a burden. Now some of you ladies will get out there and just work like everything in your flower garden.
You always do it.
Because you like it. But most normal people find that is a real burden. I don't want to do that. It's not fun. It is a burden to me. An honest man. But I'd like to close with this thought. It's just a little thing I remember reading some time back, and I think it's so true. That we need to really meditate on God's law day and night. Because if that which is within us does not come from that which is above us, we will be consumed by that which surrounds us. God meant for us to be Christians. He meant for us to use His life in a certain way.
Did you do that? That was good.
If that which is within us does not come from that which is above us, we will be consumed by that which surrounds us. And you know, it's a daily choice. I can be filled with this, or I can be filled with the world. Rusty? Thank you all.